This is my hometown, Cape Town. I'm up on the mountains, and I actually lived for a while over the hill there with all the lakes, and it's absolutely beautiful. And that's the Cape Flats there. And I've taken a break from building my vehicle because right now I'm kind of battling with this, did I make the right decision? Did I buy the right vehicle? And was the risk that I took, is it paying off? I'm Andrew St Pierre White. Join me as I share my passion for building four-wheel drive trucks and then travelling to the remotest parts of the world. I'm about to find out because the transfer gearbox and main gearbox is on its way back. And the engine too has had a lot of work done to it, including our replacement alternator, water pump, thermostat housing, clutch plate, the face has been skimmed, and also some of the components in the fuel system, new injectors and new glow plugs. The gearbox is on its way.
Gearbox is
now the process of getting it all back in there. What is that?
So they took the engine out because we needed to put the engine mountings on, and
yes,
with a couple of bolts it was easy to pull it out. What they'll do is they'll pop the engine back in and then fit the gearbox with new mountings. And the gearbox has had a considerable amount of work done to it.
Yes.
So is the transfer
more than
box.
we wanted.
Yeah.
Okay.
The noise you heard when you reversed backwards, that little bit
yes,
of a noise you heard.
Yes.
Once we stripped the gearbox down, what we found is that someone had jump started the car in reverse. Now that's not your strongest gear. If you're going to
yes,
jump start a car, you definitely don't want to do it in reverse.
Yes.
And actually to strip the teeth off the reverse gear.
Hence the clunk, 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 clunk.
Pieces and of course little bits of tooth in the gearbox, also not a good idea.
Yeah.
So that was the big
that was my question. The teeth didn't.
Well, they do, and invariably.
Did it do any damage?
It's done no other damage. There's wear on the fifth gear.
Yes.
Small fifth gear.
Yes.
You can see it's pitted.
Yes.
We are also changing that because we don't want to have any whines.
Right.
Now, when you mix new and old gears, and I'm not a gearbox specialist,
there's
this is a
potential
specialist
for
job.
whine. Yes.
You don't want to have any whines, and
yes,
especially when you're driving in fifth gear, I can imagine you filming, and it will drive me
crazy.
Drive me
okay.
crazy.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm very confident the guys have stripped the entire gearbox down, new bearings, new seals, new cluster gears gone in. We'll get all the old bits back, and then we'll be able to show the viewers what we've changed.
Goody, 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 the main gearbox. I wonder what they did to it, and I wonder what it's going to cost me. Paul, will I have to sell my children?
So here are bits that we've changed, some of them, but this is the gear that was, look at this.
That's a reverse gear.
Not good, eh? Yeah, that's really knocked those teeth clean off. Where did he keep the center diff bit?
No.
Because he changed this cluster.
Oh, I see that.
Where's the fifth gear?
The fifth gear was. Now, if you look on the tooth there, I'm not sure if you can see that. There's a lot of pitting on the tooth there.
Yes.
Okay, so if you can see that, that's the main reason. It's not that it won't work. And as I said, I'm not a gearbox specialist, but the specialist we used, his advice was change it, because the pitting on there, and then you're changing all these clusters in the main input shaft. New and old gear is not good, and especially if it's pitted. And he says that could cause a whine.
Is all of this code for yes, prepare to sell your children?
Yeah, they've changed the main worn parts that they've had to, and it's because this gear here runs together with one of these. This one here, right? Yeah.
But you see, when this happens, one of these teeth can bend. So if you put a new one on that, you get a whine, or you get the same sound as you had, the tick tick tick, because one is bent. So if you change the cluster, then it becomes a whole story. Then you can have a gear whining. 1 to 5 because you've swapped the cluster. So if you swap the cluster, you must change your input and your off gear.
The other challenge also is that even if you inspect all this, if it's cracked inside, you won't know. So if there's a crack in here, the only way to do it is to actually go and x-ray it. That costs as much as changing all this. And that was one of his other concerns, exactly what Hubert said, but if there's a crack we don't see in one of the teeth, like in your tooth in your mouth, you don't always see it till they x-ray it. And you have a crack and it's painful and it's sore, and you want to, but here we won't know, and if that happens, it's not worth the risk. So because of all this and his experience, we're referring to someone who knows and has built gearboxes for 30 years. So he really does know his stuff. So yeah.
But I hadn't seen anything yet.
So Andrew, here we've seen some great welding. I must compliment the guy who did the welding. Sadly, this is what was giving you your two-wheel drive only on the 105. So the center diff, this is part of the center diff lock, which would have a set of gears and another gear, so it's like a complete diff with the different planetary gears. By welding this up, it's only allowing the rear wheels to work, and no H4, no, only H2. So this has all come out and we put new gears in, and this will make a good paperweight on your desk.
Here it is. That to me is the symbol of this particular exercise. And in the videos to come, we finish up the build. I have a very memorable, no spoilers here, trip up to Pretoria. And yes, it did cost me more than I hoped it would. And I will make public all of the costs so you can see what it cost me and what it might cost you for a similar exercise. But how about that?
I'm going to keep that actually.
So you need to.
That is, that's a beauty. Actually, that's a real beauty. Think about it.
It is. Well, it's not often. Look, you got to give credit to people who make modifications at times in desperate needs. We don't know what the problem was. I mean, he may have had to make it out of necessity, but it never got repaired again. And that's sometimes what people do. Bush mechanics and making a plan, as we say in South Africa, when you absolutely have no choice or you can't get parts and there's only one way to get home. Well, he made a plan, and a good plan. But going forward, you need to undo that plan and put it back to what it should be.
But given the fact that it has the freewheel front hubs fitted, I don't think it was markup. This wasn't markup blunt. This was an idea gone bad.
Maybe what was happened is someone didn't pull apart the transfer box to see what was the problem.
So in other words, they fitted the freewheel hubs, the car wouldn't go anywhere, and then they realized, oops, we now have to do some welding to lock it up, and then they went, oops, now we can't go four-wheel drive.
Well,
was it that bad, do you think?
This was a plan made when they had a problem. What do you think? When they had actually had a problem somewhere along the line, and this plan was made, and then that was driving in two-wheel drive. And then, if you look when the whole thing was apart, the gearbox specialist said to us, to engage from H2 to H4 with the lever wouldn't have worked because there's a little sleeve that moves it across. That was rattling around in the transfer box. So that would have been a noise if the prop shaft's turning. Fitting the freewheeling hubs would just stop that prop shaft turning and stop a noise rattling in the transfer box. Who knows?
So you're saying it was a problem, make a plan, get home, rattle, easy way of sorting out the rattle instead of dropping the box, just put in some freewheel hubs. Okay, should we give them the benefit of the doubt?
Not the right way, but hey.
No, I'm not going to. It's far more interesting if we don't.
But you haven't compromised. Basically, everything's been changed now. Full set of gears have gone in. We've changed what needed to be changed. And that said, there are not many times that gearboxes need this sort of work. I can count on my hands, and you know more than me how many boxes do work. It's not often. You do synchros on a box, bearings, seals.
Yeah, usually we do a lot of shimming on this to set the backlash, but that's about it. In my time, I've never replaced these gears, never. So something happened, but you can't see on the old gears that it broke. or stripped. So something happened, and let's quickly repair it, maybe sell it.
No, who knows?
And the guy you bought it from, maybe he bought it from the previous guy, and
yeah, I'd like to
was
say
never
that's
told.
probably the case. I mean, someone
think
who,
it was. He didn't
where
have
you
it for
went to
long.
pick it up, I don't think he would have honestly, you know, sold this to you like that, not knowing who you are and what you're going to do with the truck. So I don't believe that's the case. He probably just didn't know. And very few people actually use 4x4 when they drive this truck around town all the time. You know, how many people actually put it into H4 or use the diff locks or anything like that. And that's more often the problems results from not being used more than being used and abused. So anyway, you've got it all done. Gearbox is going to go back in. We now have an engine, we have a gearbox, we have a car, and we've got a few able bodies that are all going to put it together again. And it will come together.
Slowly but surely.
And you know, Andrew, we didn't actually put all these parts back in your gearbox because you don't need them. It's a more modified gearbox.
Yeah, fine.
Still, you know, when you add it all up, you still don't know why people do these type of things. But what they did on the transfer box, the center differential got completely bastardized, and they took out the gears and they welded it up to make it a two-wheel drive vehicle.
So they made this they made this Toyota Land Cruiser
There was no ways that if you
into
tried
a two-wheel
to
drive vehicle.
engage, you couldn't engage H4 because from what I saw from the gearbox guy, the actual sleeve, when you slide the H4 lever from H2 to H4,
Yes.
that was rattling loose in the gearbox, in the transfer box. So of course,
astonishing.
this was just, it was never going to work, no way, and you wouldn't have known. Of course, you know, you bought this car for a really good price, and if we weigh up the odds on what we spent on doing the gearbox, the transfer box, you still have a very good vehicle. And
I know
that's the
that now.
difficult one.
I know that now. But if I had thought about it, if I had seen the freewheel hubs, I would have taken us. Oh dear! I might have just walked away from it.
I think if you tested, more importantly, if you tested the car
Yes.
and saying there's a noise in the reverse when you're reversing, that already tells a big alarm.
I knew about
noise,
that, and he
about
mentioned that, but
Yeah.
he didn't mention that it was a two-wheel drive vehicle,
Well, I don't think he either didn't know, which is possible.
which is definitely possible.
Most people, when they drive the cars permanent four-wheel drive, they don't think about it. You know? They don't always understand the use of it if you don't need it.
Yes.
So it could have been like that. The big thing with any vehicle you buy second-hand is you want to know, does H4 work, does H2 work, does low range work, are there any noises, are there any whines? So you know, a diff that's worn, you'll get a whine, a noise from it, you can feel backlash play. The gearbox, you're listening for noises, you're the feel, like you drove it, you said gears 1 through 5 felt beautiful. There was no difficult to get into gears, which can sometimes be clutch related. You know, it could be synchros worn, you didn't find any of that. When you open it, of course, then there's a different story.
Yes.
And that's always the difficulty, because in many cases, I guess on all the vehicles that I bought and sold second hand, very few ever had gearbox problems. On the whole, it's mostly differential problems, front diffs more than anything.
Okay.
You know, sometimes rear diffs, depending on what the people have done, have they been towing with it. So again, when you're looking at the truck and you're trying to find the history, was it used for towing? Because then you put a lot more wear and tear through the transmission and driveline. So it's just knowing those bits, and you don't ever really know when you buy something until you start to pull it apart. So again,
It's a lot of guesswork,
you know,
and it's unavoidable.
yeah, it's guesswork.
But a lot
it's
of it is-
guesswork if you have probably got less experience. So I'd say it's unknown. So when you've got experience on your side from fixing a lot of these cars, so someone experienced who's going to test drive this car for you would have highlighted a number of things. At that point, you could have maybe negotiated differently with the seller, and you could have also said, okay, what is it going to cost me to strip down the gearbox and possibly do some repairs, and would I be able to capture some of that money back? Okay, before I buy the car. So if I'm selling the car and I know there's a problem in the reverse gear, you might be able to negotiate a slightly better deal, which is going to fund even halfway to rebuilding a gearbox. And I guess that's where you want to be with buying second-hand vehicles, is knowing what's the outcome, the worst scenario, if you had to replace it or rebuild it.
At the moment, I have very mixed feelings about it. Let's put it this way. I bought a vehicle for 150,000 rands. That's 15,000 Australian dollars, 11,000 US dollars for a vehicle that's 20 years old. For that vehicle, I didn't pay a lot of money for it,
maybe quite a good deal, but not super good deal. So I have to now expect that I'm going to have to spend some money on it. No problem there. But the people that owned the vehicle before me, and actually before the owner that I purchased it from, did some things to the vehicle which has resulted in things that I just didn't expect. For example, they fitted a turbocharger by a company called Alpine, and I remember when they were offering this product for this vehicle, and I knew bad idea. Turbocharging an engine not built for turbocharging, with no control over the boost and no control over the internal temperatures of the engines. So it cooked the engines. To put it simply, the engines blew, and that's what happened with this vehicle. But now at this stage I'm actually quite lucky, because it blew the engine. So the owners fixed the engine, had the engine completely rebuilt. I am now the winner in this, because that vehicle has only done 45,000 kilometers since the rebuild. Compressions are good, oil pressures are good, it looks good. So I've got quite a new engine. However, some moron who just didn't understand the vehicle and how it worked decided to turn it into a part-time four-wheel drive vehicle. I mean, it's unbelievable that somebody should want to change a Land Cruiser into a two-wheel drive. Why would you want to do that? It boggles the mind. But anyway, buy something else. A full-time four-wheel drive system in a Land Cruiser is very simple. You have a differential on the axles, and you also have a full-time four-wheel drive system with a differential between the front and rear prop shafts, which sends 100% power to the front and 100% power to the back, unless there is wheel slip, which happens all of the time. When you go around a corner, the back wheels are traveling at a different speed to the front wheels. No matter what you're doing, there is difference in axle speeds all of the time. And that center differential takes care of that. You can now lock that in a situation where you need proper four-wheel drive and get all of the four-wheel drive capabilities of the vehicle. So whoever decided to turn this into a part-time four-wheel drive vehicle didn't understand that, or if they did, I want to shoot them with a machine gun. But you're right in saying that even though we have gone through this process and learnt all of these things and sorted them out, I'm still ahead, because I paid a good price for the vehicle. Very good price. I did have a residual value in there, so at the end of the day I'm actually going to have a better vehicle than I might have otherwise had, had I spent a bit more and not had one or two of these specific problems. At the end of the day, while this is irking me and frustrating me, at the end of the day, the amount I spent on the vehicle, the amount I'm spending on the vehicle, I'm still ahead. I'm still, at the end of this, I'm sure, gonna have a vehicle for the kind of money, it's really gonna be worth it. I don't believe for a moment, even in the situation now, that I'm overspending. And that's the big challenge of taking an old vehicle and getting it right. How much are you going to spend to get it right? Whichever way you look at it, there is a gamble somewhere. So far, I think the gamble is paying off. So this then is the symbol of this build. We're going to take a little bit of a break from the build on the channel right now. There are actually 7 more videos that I have lined up, basically replacing the engine and the gearbox, the fuel system, then we have the last bits and pieces, air conditioning, various things like that, and a meet and greet in Cape Town. Then I drive the vehicle on a test run, 1,600 kilometers all the way up to Pretoria. It didn't go quite as to plan, but that's a good story on its own. And then once in Pretoria, I'm actually equipping it with some very, very nice camping gear. But I'm going to take a break now and present some of the regular programming, and so we'll call the last part of this season 2. We'll start in 2 or 3 weeks' time. I'm not too sure. Just keep an eye on the playlist for the 105 Africa truck build, and then you'll be able to see any new videos that come up. But yes, the vehicle is in South Africa right this very second. In fact, my daughter's Kate's got it. and Paul has been fiddling with a few little things that weren't quite right, minor things. And the fact is that I now have a vehicle in Africa, and it literally means an 11-hour flight. I jump in my own truck and I can go and explore Africa whenever I like. I've got a vehicle with great engine, great gearbox, great transfer gearbox, completely rebuilt brake system, completely rebuilt cooling system, completely rebuilt suspension system. The interior is now wonderful with the tack mats and the tackler seat covers. The packing system, the kitchen. I've got a fantastic tent. I've got a water system. I've got a shower. I've got a rooftop tent. I'm ready to hit the road and do some amazing trips with a car that's mostly pretty new.